Stalking stage is when you start learning more about your victims, potential victims. Went to the library, I looked up their names, that address, cross-referenced, and called them a couple of times. Drove by there whenever I could.
And each time he struck, Rader said he was armed with what he calls his hit kit.
And your hit kit contained what?
Plastic bags, rope, tape, knife, gun. All those wouldn't be in the kit, they'd be where I could have them in the house and gather them up.
In-Depth Analysis 1, Dennis Lynn Rader, the BTK Killer. Dennis Lynn Rader, known by the chilling moniker, BTK, bind, torture, kill, is one of the most terrifying examples in modern criminological history of the mask of sanity. For over 3 decades, Rader lived 2 parallel lives, one as a husband, father, church leader, and diligent public servant in Park City, Kansas, the other as a brutal predator, a cold-blooded serial killer who terrorized the Wichita community from 1974 to 1991. His case is shocking not only for its level of violence but also for Rader's extraordinary ability to conceal his true nature, manipulate public perception, and play an arrogant cat-and-mouse game with the police. He didn't just kill, he craved recognition. He named himself, sent taunting letters, and then vanished into silence, leaving behind a legacy of fear and a cold case that seemed destined to remain unsolved. The downfall of Dennis Rader, ultimately, was not due to a brilliant investigation, but to his own uncontrollable narcissism and a rudimentary technological error, which ripped away the mask he had carefully worn for 31 years. 1. The formative years, the origin of Factor X. To understand the BTK monster, one must look at Dennis Rader, the boy who grew up in Wichita. Born on March 9, 1945, Rader was the eldest of 4 sons. Outwardly, the Rader family was the epitome of the post-war American working class, a father, William, who worked for a utility company, and a mother, Dorothea, who was a homemaker. However, beneath that placid surface were undercurrents of dysfunction. Rader's father was a distant man who rarely showed affection. Conversely, Rader's mother was described as controlling and somewhat suffocating. The absence of a strong, positive male role model, combined with a feeling of being overshadowed by his mother, may have planted the seeds for Rader's later fantasies of power and domination. The warning signs, what criminologists refer to as the Macdonald triad, bedwetting, arson, animal cruelty, appeared early. Rader admitted to acts of animal cruelty as a child. He would hang stray cats and dogs, finding a sick pleasure in the act of taking life and controlling their fate. But even more disturbing was the early development of a deviant sexual fantasy life. Rader became obsessed with bondage. He began stealing women's underwear from neighbors, not for their value, but to use in autoerotic bondage rituals. He would wear his mother's underwear, tie himself in vulnerable positions, and achieve sexual gratification from the feeling of being bound and suffocated. This was the nucleus of what would later become the bind in the BTK moniker. Rader also developed prowler behavior. He enjoyed breaking into strangers' homes, not necessarily to steal, but to experience the thrill of violating their private space. He would spy on couples, fantasizing about being the one in control. These fantasies, which he called his projects, grew increasingly elaborate and violent in his mind. He dubbed this dark urge Factor X, an internal entity he believed controlled him, a way to dissociate himself from the responsibility for his actions. Part 2. The Perfect Mask, The 2 Lives of Dennis Rader. Rader's most incredible skill was compartmentalization. He built a public life so perfect that no one could possibly suspect him. After high school, Rader joined the U.S. Air Force in the mid-1960s. It was in the military that he learned discipline, meticulousness, and how to follow, and bend, rules. After his discharge in 1970, he returned to Wichita, attended Wichita State University, and earned a degree in administration of justice. In 1971, he married Paula Dietz. Their marriage lasted 34 years and produced 2 children, Carrie and Brian. To his family, Rader was a strict but seemingly devoted father. He was a regular churchgoer, and not just a member of the congregation. Rader rose to become the president of the Council of the Christ Lutheran Church. He was also a Boy Scout leader. Professionally, he worked for the ADT Security Company from 1974 to 1988. Ironically, his job was installing security systems for people who were terrified of a serial killer on the loose, him. This gave him invaluable knowledge about how to disable alarms, the layout of homes, and how to exploit security vulnerabilities. In 1991, Rader took a job that seemed perfectly suited to his controlling nature, a compliance officer for Park City, a suburb of Wichita. He became infamous, and hated, in the community for his rigidity, frequently patrolling with a tape measure to find people whose grass was too tall or whose fences were non-compliant. He was a petty tyrant, and the job allowed him to exercise his dominance publicly and legally. While Dennis Rader, the citizen, was busy with church meetings and measuring lawns, BTK, the monster, was planning his projects. The crimes and the BTK method. BTK was not an impulsive killer. Each murder was a meticulously planned project, sometimes for months. He stalked his victims, learned their schedules, the layout of their homes, and the moments they were most vulnerable. The horrific beginning, 1974. The Otero Family. On January 15, 1974, Rader acted on his violent fantasies for the first time. He targeted the Otero family. He cut the phone lines and broke into their home during the day, waiting for them to return. When Joseph, 38, Julie, 33, and their two young children, Josephine, 11, and Joseph Jr., 9, walked in, Rader confronted them with a gun. He lied, telling them he was a wanted fugitive and just needed money and a car. He reassured them, making them believe that if they cooperated, they would be safe. This was a key part of his MO, Modus Operandi, creating an illusion of survival to ensure compliance. Then, he implemented the bind. He methodically tied each one up, taking them to different rooms. Once they were bound and helpless, the true nature of Factor X emerged. He tortured and finally killed all four. He strangled his victims with rope. Josephine, 11, was taken to the basement and hanged from a pipe. He left semen at the scene, a clear sign of the powerful sexual component of his crimes. The Otero massacre shocked Wichita. Its brutality and calculation were unprecedented. Continuing the reign of terror, 1974 to 1977. Just a few months later, in April 1974, Rader broke into the apartment of Catherine Bright, 21. He had been stalking her. When she returned home with her brother, Kevin, Rader attacked them. He shot Kevin, who miraculously survived, and then took Catherine to the bedroom, bound her, and stabbed her to death. In 1977, he struck twice more. In March, he talked his way into Shirley Vian's, 24, home by pretending to be a detective. He bound her and her three young children, who were locked in the bathroom, before strangling her on her bed. In December, he broke into the home of Nancy Fox, 25, cut the phone lines, and bound and strangled her. After killing Nancy Fox, Rader made one of his most arrogant moves. He called the police from a public payphone and reported his own murder, using a distorted voice. The crimes and the BTK method. BTK was not an impulsive killer. Each murder was a meticulously planned project, sometimes for months. He stalked his victims, learned their schedules, the layout of their homes, and the moments they were most vulnerable. The horrific beginning, 1974. The Otero Family. On January 15, 1974, Rader acted on his violent fantasies for the first time. He targeted the Otero family. He cut the phone lines and broke into their home during the day, waiting for them to return. When Joseph, 38, Julie, 33, and their two young children, Josephine, 11, and Joseph Jr., 9, walked in, Rader confronted them with a gun. He lied, telling them he was a wanted fugitive and just needed money and a car. He reassured them, making them believe that if they cooperated, they would be safe. This was a key part of his MO, Modus Operandi, creating an illusion of survival to ensure compliance. Then, he implemented the bind. He methodically tied each one up, taking them to different rooms. Once they were bound and helpless, the true nature of Factor X emerged. He tortured and finally killed all 4. He strangled his victims with rope. Josephine, 11, was taken to the basement and hanged from a pipe. He left semen at the scene, a clear sign of the powerful sexual component of his crimes. The Otero massacre shocked Wichita. Its brutality and calculation were unprecedented. Continuing the reign of terror, 1974 to 1977. Just a few months later, in April 1974, Rader broke into the apartment of Catherine Bright, 21. He had been stalking her. When she returned home with her brother, Kevin, Rader attacked them. He shot Kevin, who miraculously survived, and then took Catherine to the bedroom, bound her, and stabbed her to death. In 1977, he struck twice more. In March, he talked his way into Shirley Vian's, 24, home by pretending to be a detective. He bound her and her 3 young children, who were locked in the bathroom, before strangling her on her bed. In December, he broke into the home of Nancy Fox, 25, cut the phone lines, and bound and strangled her. After killing Nancy Fox, Rader made one of his most arrogant moves. He called the police from a public payphone and reported his own murder, using a distorted voice. The resurgence and the fatal mistake. What brought BTK back into the spotlight? Narcissism. In 2004, the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders was approaching. The local paper, the Wichita Eagle, ran a retrospective article on the BTK case, which included speculation that the killer was dead or old. For a narcissist like Rader, this was unacceptable. He could not let his legacy be forgotten or misdefined. In March 2004, BTK re-emerged. He sent a letter to the Wichita Eagle containing irrefutable proof, Vicki Wegerls, the 1986 victim, driver's license and photos from her crime scene. The message was clear: I am still here. This began a bizarre, year-long series of 11 communications. Rader, now nearly 60, was playing his old game, but the world had changed. Technology had changed. He sent puzzles, sketches, and even a bound doll in the BTK style. He left cereal boxes on the side of the road with messages inside. He was reveling in the attention. The Wichita police, now led by Lieutenant Ken Landwehr, a detective who had been on the case since the 70s, played along. They communicated with him via classified ads in the paper, hoping he would make a mistake. And then, he did. In January 2005, Rader sent a package containing a 3.5-inch floppy disk to the Fox affiliate KSAS-TV. He had previously asked the police, via a message, a crucial question: can I communicate via floppy disk without being traced? In a brilliant strategic move, the police replied, via a newspaper ad, Rex, it will be safe to use the disk. Rex was one of his chosen aliases. They lied. Rader, believing he was safe, sent the disk. As soon as they received it, forensic computer experts went to work. They recovered a deleted Word document from the disk. The document's metadata revealed 2 critical pieces of information. The organization was listed as Christ Lutheran Church, and the last person to modify it was named Dennis. Within hours, investigators had a name: Dennis Rader, the president of that church's council. Everything quickly fell into place. Rader worked for Park City. He drove a black Jeep Cherokee, which matched some vague witness descriptions. But they needed definitive proof. They needed DNA. Investigators secretly obtained a warrant to collect a DNA sample from Rader's daughter, Carrie, from a pap smear she had done at a university health clinic. They compared her DNA to the DNA, semen, collected from the 1974 Otero crime scene. The result was a near-certain familial match. They had him. I Am BTK, The Confession and Psychological Profile. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was driving home for lunch, completely unsuspecting. Dozens of police cars covertly moved in and blocked him off. Lieutenant Landwehr walked up to his window. "Mr. Rader," he said, "I need to talk to you about the BTK case." Rader, according to the detectives, turned white. The mask shattered. At the police station, Rader initially tried to deny it, but when confronted with the DNA evidence, he knew the game was over. And then, a strange thing happened. He started talking. He talked for over 30 hours. This was not a remorseful confession. It was a proud presentation. In a flat, almost bored monotone, Rader calmly recounted every single murder, every project, in meticulous detail. He described the stalking, the entry, and the final moments of his victims as if he were reading a grocery list. He seemed to be reliving the moments, savoring them one last time. He was a professor lecturing on his life's achievements to an enthralled audience. When detectives asked why he had stopped, he explained coolly that life had gotten busy, work, church, kids, and that he found substitute gratification in his compliance officer job and his private autoerotic fantasies. Psychologists and criminologists have analyzed Rader extensively. He is a classic case of narcissistic personality disorder. He possessed an extreme sense of grandiosity. He believed he was smarter than the police. It was this narcissism that drove him to re-emerge in 2004 and ultimately led to his capture. Sexual sadism, his entire motivation was sexual, but it was inextricably linked to inflicting pain and domination. For Rader, the fear, helplessness, and the final moments of his victims' lives were the ultimate sexual stimulant. The bind and torture were more important to him than the kill. Obsessive-compulsive, OCD, traits, his meticulousness, planning projects, keeping records, coining his own name, showed a need for order and control. Compartmentalization, he could be Dennis, the family man, at 5 p.m. after being BTK, the killer, at 3 p.m. In his mind, these were two separate people, allowing him to function in society without suspicion. The trial, sentence, and legacy. Dennis Rader waived his right to a trial. He wanted his day in court to speak. On June 27, 2005, Rader pleaded guilty to 10 counts of first-degree murder. The most chilling moment of the proceedings was Rader's allocution. Asked to describe his crimes for the record, Rader stood before the court and, once again, in that cold, emotionless voice, gave a graphic, step-by-step retelling of each murder. He spoke of the Otero family being in a good situation before he put them down. Victims' family members in the courtroom wept and screamed, but Rader remained unfazed. He was having his final moment in the spotlight. On August 18, 2005, after 2 days of emotional testimony from the victims' families, Judge Gregory Waller sentenced Dennis Rader. Because his crimes occurred before Kansas reinstated the death penalty, the maximum sentence was life. Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms, for a minimum total of 175 years in prison without the possibility of parole. He will die in prison. Rader's wife, Paula, was granted an emergency divorce immediately after his arrest. His daughter, Carrie, has struggled to reconcile the father she loved with the monster he truly was. Dennis Rader is currently incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility, held in solitary confinement 23 hours a day for his own safety. He remains an object of study for criminologists, a living example of an organized, narcissistic psychopath. The legacy of BTK is a cold reminder that evil doesn't always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes, it lives right next door, measures your fence, shakes your hand at church, and waves as you go to work. Dennis Rader didn't just kill 10 people, he shattered an entire community's sense of security for decades, proving that the most terrifying monster can be the one wearing the most ordinary mask.